Hi guys, it's Hinda and welcome back to Cooking Fantasies. In today's video, we're going to be making these beautiful and delicious raspberry macarons. We're going to make them using a basic French meringue recipe, and we're going to be filling them with an amazing raspberry ganache. So this video is going to be a step-by-step tutorial or demonstration on how to make the perfect macarons. I'm going to be sharing with you everything I have learned so far, all the tips you need to know to make the perfect macaron shells. And as I said, this is going to be a basic macarons with a French meringue. And in the future videos, I will be showing you how I make macarons using other techniques and also other flavors. So if you haven't subscribed yet to the channel, make sure to hit the subscribe button and the little bell to get all the notifications. And let's get started. We will first prepare the ganache, and for this I need some sugar, water, frozen raspberries and white chocolate. Your other option is to use raspberry puree that you can buy already from the store, and in this case you're only gonna need raspberry puree and white chocolate. And since I'm using frozen raspberries, I'm gonna have to make my own puree by mixing together the raspberries with the sugar and some water. The exact amount of the ingredients and also the alternatives you're gonna find down in the description box, where I always leave them with both the grams and cups measurements. And blend everything together using a food processor until you have something like a raspberry sorbet. And now transfer your mixture into a cooking pot and allow it to simmer on a medium heat. Of course, if you are using raspberry puree, then you need to skip the mixing part and add your puree directly to a cooking pot on a medium heat. And while I'm waiting for it to simmer, I have to prepare my chocolate, because here I'm using chocolate blocks. I have to chop them into small pieces so that they melt easier. If you are using chocolate drops or chocolate chips, you can skip this part, obviously. Once the raspberries start making bubbles and simmering, we're gonna allow them to cook for a further 4 to 5 minutes. And the point here is to get rid of all the water and to make it thicker. And to get rid of all the little seeds from the raspberries, I'm gonna use a strainer to sieve it through, because I like the ganache to be kind of smooth and I don't like the seeds in the texture. But if you don't mind, if you prefer the seeds, if they don't bother you, go ahead, skip this step and leave the seeds. And finally, we're gonna add the white chocolate to the puree on 3 goes and while it's still hot. Then use just a spatula with circular motions from the center outwards and keep mixing till all the chocolate has melted. Make sure not to use any whisk, we don't want to incorporate any air. And then add the second third of the chocolate, repeat, add the third and repeat till you have incorporated all the chocolate into your puree. A fruit puree stays normally hot for a longer period of time, but if for whatever reason you see that you still have chunks of chocolate that would melt, go ahead and microwave it for the shortest period of time, or use a hot water bath until all the chocolate has totally melted. And as you can see, the ganache is still runny, but it will thicken and get the right consistency after setting and cooling down. The color will also change to kind of pastel because of the white chocolate. And that's why you're gonna need to make your ganache at least 3 to 4 hours in advance. The longer, the better. So now use a piece of plastic wrap and cover it in touch. Make sure it's touching the ganache, otherwise it will steam and the water drops will fall on the ganache and it will ruin the texture. And now for the actual macarons, we're gonna need icing sugar, white sugar. You're gonna need egg whites that you have separated at least 2 hours before, and they should be in room temperature. And we're gonna need almond flour, almond meal. If you don't have, you can use almond flakes and process them. And again, check the description box for the exact amounts of the ingredients. The very first step that you should never skip to realize macarons is processing the icing sugar with the almond flour together to make what we call temps-pourtant. Sometimes you can buy this temps-pourtant ready from a supermarket or from your store, and it's basically just icing sugar and almond flour processed together into a very thin powder. And here you have to be careful to process it just enough to get a thin powder and not more, because otherwise the almonds will start releasing the oils and you don't want to have that. A good way to do it is to process it for a few seconds, then use a fork or any other tool to release all the almonds that tends to cramp into the corners because of the oils it starts releasing. Make sure to mix everything together till you see that all the sugar is covering the almonds in a way. And repeat for about 3 times, but never more than 30 seconds at the time. You should stop when you are happy with the texture. You see that it's a really nice thin powder, but sometimes you're gonna have to stop just because the mixture is getting kind of wet, which means the almonds started releasing the oils, and you're gonna have to stop at this point. The next step is to sieve this preparation in order to get rid of whatever escaped the processor. The point of this is to get a very fine powder, and this will allow us to have a very smooth macaron shells and not so grainy. So the better you process the mixture and you sieve it, the finer your product is, the smoother your macarons are going to be. Once you have sieved all the icing sugar with the almond powder, and you are left with these grainy leftovers. If it's between half a tablespoon to 1 tablespoon, it's totally fine. You can dispose of it, you can snack on it, just leave it on the side and proceed with your recipe. If it is more than that, then you want to take these leftovers, process them one more time, and repeat till you are left with about half a tablespoon to 1 tablespoon. Otherwise, this will affect the quantity and will affect the end result. Now the perfect tompoton is ready. We're going to keep it on the side and start making the meringue. As I said, it is important that the egg whites are in room temperature and that you have separated them from the egg yolks at least 2 hours before, and it's even better if you do it the day before. It is also better to avoid using plastic containers while making your meringue because plastic tends to hold on to fat or oily substances, and this can affect the texture of your meringue. So start beating the egg whites on a medium speed till they start turning white, and then you're gonna increase the speed and start adding the sugar gradually on 3 goes, for example, and continuously beating till you achieve a very nice, shiny and smooth meringue. It is also important here that you don't see the grains of sugar anymore in your meringue. So about 10 to 15 minutes after, depending on the power of the mixer you are using, this is what you should end up with. It's very smooth and shiny, it's holding together really nice, and it makes this nice peak when you pull it up. And this is the perfect French meringue, which will be the base of our French macarons. And now it's finally time to do our macaronage, which is the most important step in making macarons, and it is incorporating the almond and icing sugar into the meringue we have prepared. So start by adding the third of the meringue to the dry ingredients or to the tompoton we have prepared. It is important to add the meringue to the dry ingredients and not vice versa. And it is also the perfect time to add the colors. Because we are making raspberry macarons, I find the combination of red and pink perfect, but use whatever color you preferred, but avoid using liquid food coloring because it does affect the consistency of the macarons. Go better for powder food coloring or gel. And as I said, macaronage is the most important step in making the macarons. The perfect macaronage technique is to kind of fold from down to get all the crumbs and then give it one smash from the top to get rid of the air. And you continue doing this movement until you have incorporated all the meringue. Also, and I forgot to mention earlier, you can add the color directly while making the meringue. I have the habit of adding the color only at the macaronage because I make usually batches and separate them into different flavors. So I want to make my meringue and my tompoton, and only after separating I will be adding the color while doing the macaronage. But if you are making only one flavor, go ahead and add the color while making the meringue. It is of course easier. And here actually there is no right amount of time or how many times you should be repeating this until you achieve the right consistency of the batter. But instead you should be looking for the shininess, and once you start having a nice shininess to your batter, you will start doing the test already. So after each 2 to 3 movements or folding, you're gonna pull some batter and it should be running like a ribbon without breaking. And because you don't want to overmix it neither, which will ruin the macarons, you're gonna have to be repeating this test after each 3 to 4 times you're folding. Also here in the video, I'm working with a double recipe. I will be providing you down with the half amount of the ingredients. So go ahead and start only with the half, with the minimum, until you master it before going with bigger patches. This will give you more control over the batter. And this is exactly what we're looking for, so it's time to stop. To pipe the macarons, you're going to need a piping bag and a small round tip. Using this specific macaron silicone mat makes it easier because it gives you the guidance to pipe even macarons that have the same size. If you don't have that, you can use parchment paper, and if you need guidance, just print the circles from the internet. They're everywhere. Place them under the parchment paper and pipe your macarons on them. This will make it easier for you to get them even. Also, if you are using parchment paper, add a little bit of batter between the parchment paper and the baking sheet. This will make it more stable and will make it easier for you to pipe your macarons. And once you've finished piping, give you the baking sheets few taps against the table or underneath with your hands to get rid of all the air bubbles, and allow them to totally dry between 15 to 30 minutes before baking. And they should be dry. When you touch them with the finger, they shouldn't stick to the finger. Then it's time to bake. The oven must be preheated to 150 degrees Celsius, that's 300 degrees Fahrenheit, and there shouldn't be any traces of moist or steam. And once out of the oven, allow them to cool for at least 10 minutes before removing them from the silicone mat or parchment paper wherever you bake them. And finally, it's time to assemble or fill our macarons, and we're going to be using the same piping tip we used to pipe the macarons. To make it easier, start by matching the macarons. Find the two that fit perfectly together, place them next to each other and start piping. The amount of the ganache or filling you're adding is also very important. You don't want to add too much all the way to the sides of the macarons, otherwise once you close them you will squeeze the ganache and it will be spilling from the sides. It doesn't look nice and it's not easy to eat. I would suggest piping the first macaron, close it, squeeze it, see if it's enough, and then you will know if you need to be piping more or less ganache before finishing the whole batch. You can serve and enjoy the macarons right away, or you can save them in an airtight container in the fridge for up to 2 days. You can also perfectly make the macarons in advance and freeze them, but you're gonna have to do this separately, which means you will need to be freezing the shells separate from the ganache. Just make sure that they are in an airtight container, they are not touching each other. So add the parchment paper between each layer of macaron shells, then seal them and freeze them for up to a month, and also the ganache separate, and just assemble them or fill them right before serving. And this is how to make the easiest French macarons with a basic French meringue. In the next video, we're going to be making macarons with Italian meringue and Swiss meringue, and I will be explaining to you the difference. And of course, we'll be making them with different flavors and many other delicious recipes to come. I thank you for watching and I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, please give it a thumbs up. If you tried the recipe, please let me know in the comments how it turned out. I'm always happy to read for you. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the little bell to get all the recipes, and see you soon in a new video. Happy baking!